I love it. All right. So Brandy, we were just talking about this pre-show, but let's just start off with something fun. What do you get excited about?
Oh,
How do we were talking about your voice and how I interpret it as soft, but what gets Brandy really excited? Like, what is it?
oh, I mean, a lot. but but if I had to choose one thing, it's probably inspiration.
Mm,
Which luckily I am grateful enough to find pretty much everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I get really, really excited when I see something that inspires me to create. Like that is the ultimate feeling of everything.
That's awesome.
Like, so whether it's like a photo or scrolling through Pinterest or flipping through a magazine,
Mm,
being outside, looking at flowers, like, oh my gosh, like the flower market, oh, inspiration heaven.
okay.
Like, the dollar store, like I could just walk through the aisles and be like, this, I see a photo with this,
Mm,
so that's what gets me excited when I see something that I'm like, I can create with this.
I love
That's
that.
that. That's that's the best
That's
feeling.
so cool. I was trying to think earlier today of like where I first saw your work, because I'm always looking for photographers, one for guests and for my own inspiration and just like who's out there. Like I want to have a pulse on like what kind of work is being made and what's really cool. And I think like for me, I just found out that you shoot some weddings as well. What I know you for is your self-portraiture, right? Like that's what we
Yeah.
see. And so I was trying to think, like I know a lot of New York City folks, like Dave Krugman, or
Yeah.
Andre Leroux. Trying to think, Sam Blake,
Felix Kuhns.
Felix Coons. Okay, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. That is how we came about? Is like Felix knows who you are?
Yeah, maybe
Okay,
actually.
his episode was out
Yeah.
yesterday or Wednesday.
I listened to
Oh,
it. I really enjoyed it.
that's
Yeah.
great.
He's a bestie. He's right down the hall. So
Oh, that's
it's
so
yeah.
fun. I love that. I love that. I need to next time I'm in New York City, I'm gonna text you and be like, can I come see the magical zone with all these
Yeah.
artists? Like
It's
quintessential New
crazy. It's
York.
crazy.
That
Yeah,
I
truly.
love that.
Truly.
So yeah, I think I saw your work and I was like, this is so cool. And what's funny is like your work, quote unquote, at least that we see, publicly, content wise, is like your work is you, which is so cool. I think that's
Yeah.
like the um, in my mind, in a lot of photographers' minds, they're like, no, please don't put me on camera. And you have volunteered. So I just want to start off with a deep question, like how how have
Shoot.
you gone about that? Does that feel comfortable, or have you always felt that comfortable, or like what was the process to get you to where you are now? Just not even the work wise, just being ready and being like, hey, I'm going to put just me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it actually, because yeah, I was not somebody that's was comfortable
Mm,
with being in front of the camera for a really long time. Like I did take self-portraits like in middle school and high school, with my parents' camera
yeah.
and that type of thing, like I remember being like on MySpace and I was like, oh, like these people look so cool. Like, I think I can do that too. So I would like steal my parents' camera and like try to take self portraits, like
Okay.
the high angle, like, oh my God, it's embarrassing. But so that aside, I definitely was not somebody that was comfortable being in front of the camera. It wasn't until about 2017, and I've been shooting, by the way, since 2010,
Okay. Yeah.
but it wasn't until about 2017 that I um, was comfortable putting myself in front of the camera and doing more self portraits.
Mm,
And that just came about because I wanted to start being more creative and photographing things that were not necessarily the stuff that I was photographing for
right.
money, right? Like events and headshots and that type of thing, but like something a little bit more creative, right? A
Yeah.
little bit more fantastical and like girly and feminine.
Yeah.
And I really like woke up from a dream and was like, I want to do this right now. And like, I didn't have time to like book a model and I makeup artists and stuff. So I just started to like do it myself. And
Wow.
I took thousands of photos and they were all terrible. And one maybe like turned out. But that started something really, really fun for me, like this creative exploration of like, what is possible when I don't have all of these limitations,
Yeah.
right? Like I just have my imagination, this white wall, and maybe a prop or something. And I'm just like I had one light back then and a beauty dish.
Yeah.
And so I was trying also to like learn strobe lighting too with self-portraiture.
Yeah.
So always trying to like move that around and stuff too. So it honestly, it came from, going back to your question, I just like took it and ran.
Go for it. That's where it's at.
So I wasn't comfortable until I started doing it for like myself, for my own creativity, to roam free. And now it's just something I really, really enjoy as a creative outlet. So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be, but
that's cool.
Definitely wasn't always comfortable with it at first. And still actually I have, I've grown out of a lot of that self-confidence, like being in front of a camera, especially if other people are in the room.
Yeah.
But I've grown to like not really care as much at all.
That's good. Yeah. Cause I mean, like some of your stuff, it's like such a cool range, right? Like it might be you with usually flowers, it seems like, but then it might just be like experimenting with your expression, with your hair, with sometimes you're wearing dresses, sometimes you're wearing nothing, sometimes you're at the beach, sometimes you're like in a bathtub, like whatever.
Yes.
And the number one thing, the reason you're on this show, which not that it's a big deal, but like it like I haven't seen anybody else's work like yours. I've seen elements of your work, and if you showed me your heroes like on a spread, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay, or whatever. But I love talking to people who I'm like, if somebody likes this, Brandi is it. Like that's where it's at. So that's really, really cool. I love that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that means a lot. It really does. It's funny because I feel like I'm nothing but a collection of exactly all of my photo heroes, all of the images and things that I've ever seen,
Sure.
Just like compiled in this machine, and like whatever comes out is that. So I'm glad that you like it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's so funny talking to photographers, and it's such a weird, I like this about the industry, but it's kind of like, I'll give you an example. Like I grew up playing music, and so I went to college for guitar. So I was in the music world, right? And there are people who are like, classically trained, right? Suit and tie, like, whatever. And then there's somebody like me who's like,
renegade. You're just like,
yeah, I'm from like a redneck town. I played in a metal band, like, all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
That kind of stuff. Yet we're both at the same school. We're kind of in the same industry. Like we're in, and at least at school, it's like we were required to fulfill the same requirements. And you might not think that those two people are the same thing, but it's like the expression is different. And with photography, it's like, I love, just the, like how much you've let loose, it seems like. And you talked about this, like, what would I make if it didn't require money, or whatever, or like my limitations weren't like, is this going to be good enough for the brand or whatever? And like, you have finished products that you show, but it's like, you love playing, you love like jamming, like in music, like when musicians get together and they're like, let's just jam out on something. Like we don't have to make a record right now. Like,
and to be honest, the same as you, like I also love being in a diverse group of people that are doing things different than me. So like for you and your music, I'm sure it was cool to like be around people that are not quite like you, so that they're kind of influencing you in different ways and like pushing you to see things differently too, right? Like it's the same, right? Like I love being around other creatives. Emily Teague, my roommate, is a fashion photographer. We're always like, although we're inspired by a lot of the same things, we also are inspired by different things. And it's always fun to like just be around people that are challenging you a little bit. Like,
do you this is another New Yorker who I love. Her name is Noemi Chinanga.
I'm probably familiar with her work, but not the name. I'm such a visual person that like,
I'll send you her
names
IG.
Are hard.
Yeah, no, it's okay. She
yes, please do.
She's a big like self-portraiture person, and just for the sake of, I think like practice, self-reflection, documenting how they feel, all that kind of stuff. I think that is it's pretty cool. So it's like, but in a very different vein.
Oh, that's up my alley. Yeah. Oh, that sounds, I would love to see her work. She sounds like my people.
She's super cool. Also with a cool name like Noemi, like, but every name is cool when your name is Adam. It. So, yeah. So give me a little about the Brandi background, so like, I think I heard 2010 as like starting in, kind of in photography. I don't know if that was like the time you were playing with your parents' cameras, but like, are you from New York? How'd you get into photography? When did you go? Like something we talk about in the podcast all the time with people that I think they is, not really talked about is like, when did you go full time, quote unquote, or when did you do that? So give me a little bit about the Brandi background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to take this and run and reel me in if I like go too like on any tangents.
No.
So the Brandi background is I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. Very important distinction. I'm from Missouri, not from Kansas. And I grew up in the suburbs. And I loved creating pretty much from the get-go. Like my mom, I'm so grateful for my family that really encouraged a lot of like creative activities. She let me like draw on the walls in my bedroom. Like I would have like crayon like murals and like this wallpaper that was like little hearts that were polka dots. So I would like connect the dots and like do all these like crazy things on my wall. And I would like put up different magazine rippings and stuff on my wall. So it truly was like this space that I could curate to be like whatever it was that I thought was cool.
Some people say, some people will be like, oh, she's creative. And some people are like, oh, serial killer. No, I just thought of that with the magazine clippings. You go, one false move.
That's so.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's so funny. Yeah, no.
Statistically, you're safe, though. There's never been a woman serial killer, so you're totally fine. Like,
wow,
literally
really?
Zero.
Oh.
Literally zero. Like,
okay.
If nothing says more about America.
I could be the first.
Yeah. Anyway, keep going. Sorry, Kansas City.
Sorry. No, yeah. So, yeah, wow. I stopped really like at the beginning of the story. So, yeah. So I luckily grew up in a really creatively flourishing kind of childhood. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to be some sort of creative from a super young age. And it wasn't until high school that I had a really awesome high school teacher in class that, just allowed me to like see photography as like an actual job and like thing that you can do, and it's to me in my mind in high school, you're just like, what am I doing? What am I interested in? And, my art class and my photography class was everything to me. Like I would, skip as much time as possible in the other classes to go hang out with those teachers, and be like, so I knew that I was interested then. And when it came time to go to college, I knew that I wanted to be a photographer, but I also was like, well, what if I'm not any good at it? What if it turns out that like nobody books me? And like, in Kansas City, it's hard kind of, I feel like to start out being a photographer, just like in my mind, like a small market. And I would challenge that now, by the way. But in my mind, I was like, okay, so if I'm going to college, I want to be more well-rounded. So I actually went to college first for graphic design because I thought that would help me like, be a creative in whatever it is in the world that I was going to do. And especially in a photography business. But it wasn't until like halfway through my first semester in college that I started to see the photography studios and the professors and all of my friends that I was making were in the program. And I was like, okay, I'm switching. Like, it turns out you can be a photographer without going to school for sure. Yeah. But there's things that you learn in the program that I was just like, I don't know anything about studio lighting. I would love to learn and have like that dedicated time. Yeah. So college was awesome. I went to school at University of Central Missouri. That program actually is no longer available, which is really sad that they didn't have the numbers to keep going, which I'm just like, oh, tear, like there it goes. Yeah. But I had wonderful teachers that really encouraged me. And yeah, my senior year, I was like, okay, like I'm going to take what I know and go forth and like create a business. So I had to create a business plan and all this stuff. And at the time I thought I wanted to move to Chicago, actually. I joined a photography organization that was really instrumental to my growth and my beginnings here in New York, actually, which is ASMP, the American Society of Media Photographers. Yeah. So I was a student member in Kansas City and I was super involved with all of the events that they were doing and started to meet all the photographers in Kansas City and tell them I was graduating. I'm interested in moving into Chicago to pursue fashion photography. Like I thought That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they told me like you should call up these members and just like get them on the phone and say like, hey, I'm thinking about moving there. Do you have any like work? Like I would love to assist you. I would love to meet you for coffee, like this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just chat about the photo industry there, which I'm so glad they did, because I called about 5 people and they were all like, so you're interested in fashion, you should move to New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
like it's not really here, like there's a handful of jobs and a lot of photographers, so the pool is really, really small for you to get started. So even if you're trying to be on set, like being an assistant for those jobs is hard.
Right.
And so I was just like, oh, well, that blows my mind, because I'd only been to Chicago before and I loved it. And I'd never been to New York before. Ever. Yeah. And so I was just like, okay, good to know. So I'm graduating in like a month, and and my plan is totally like blew
exploding
up. Yes, but I did know a girl, a photographer, my friend Presley Ann, actually, who was from Kansas City, who had recently moved to New York City to pursue fashion photography.
Wow.
And so I called her and I was like, hi, I'm thinking about doing this. And she's like, I need a roommate. You should move to New York and be my roommate. And I was like, oh my God, is this happening? Like, is this a thing that happens?
Then she told you, she was like, you can live in a basement 27 miles from New York City for $1,800 a month, and there's no plumbing. And you said, sign me up.
Literally, it was not, you're not far off. You're really not far off. Like, she sold me somehow, even though her current living situation at the time was like sleeping on somebody else's couch for like $800 a month. Like on a couch.
Yep.
And I was just like, yeah, that sounds like an adventure. Sign me up. So yeah, I graduated, got my little degree, and I begged my dad to help like drive me to New York. Wow. I had never, ever visited before. I was just like, let's go. Like, I'm going to go be this girl's roommate and like be a fashion photographer. And so I got here. We found an apartment that was actually adorable. It was like a cute little 2-bedroom in Bed-Stuy, which was like a rough area when I moved here, but it had a lot of character. It toughened me up a little bit.
That's
right. And yeah, I got really involved with ACE&P's chapter here. Okay. So I started to network with all of the photographers and really started to get my feet wet with assisting and just understanding the industry. Yeah. It wasn't until I started assisting for a lot of fashion shoots that I realized that I'm inspired by certain things about the fashion industry, but I wouldn't say like I realized I didn't want to like fully be a fashion photographer, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like
what's that look like, if you don't mind, for people who are maybe not in the fashion world? Or like, my impression of fashion photography is like perfect photos of perfect people, which I think is totally fine, right? Because we're trying to show off the actual outfit or whatever. But like, tell me a little bit more about what you didn't like or what you were inspired by, and how you made that decision.
Yeah. So I'm definitely inspired by the final images, right? The beautiful, any beauty I'm inspired by, right? Like beautiful clothing, beautiful hair, beautiful makeup, models, the whole set, like behind the scenes. Like, I just think there's something really, really cool and inspiring and beautiful just in that. But I did find something that I didn't quite love is, and I'll say, like, when I moved here for fashion photography, everybody was like, they're going to chew you up. They're going to spit you out. I got a lot of pushback, actually, especially from my Kansas City community. Like, you're too nice. The people there are really mean. Like, you're going to have to hustle and work really, really hard, which is true. Yeah. And for the most part, like, I wouldn't say that everybody was mean and everybody is like cutthroat, as they say. But there's definitely those people out there. And after a few sets of like, oh, well, this person's really famous and this person is really, gets a lot of work and is like known as being a fashion photographer. Yeah. And I wasn't really connecting with them, like, not to say that they were bad people, but sure. You start to realize like who your people are. Yeah. And this is probably something I'll speak more on later, but I just started to realize that the established fashion photographers were not my people. They weren't so warm and inviting and giving with information. It was very much like, these are my clients and don't talk to anybody on set and like all these things. And I was just like, I'm going to do my own thing. I think, like I don't want to kill myself working, 12-hour days for somebody and not really feel like appreciated even,
Sure.
like, so that's kind of like the short version of why I was like, okay, let me branch out a little bit from fashion. And so, yeah, I started shooting a lot of model tests for myself for building my own book.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I'm in New York City. I have access to all these people and all this talent.
Yeah.
Like, I better make use of it.
Break that down for us even more. So it's like for people who don't know, and when I say people don't know, I'm like me, no, but also too,
sorry.
So people in the kind of the ASMP world, also fashion world, like even a few years ago, everything's still based on a book. So kind of walk through that, model tests, like, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, interestingly enough, I kind of, when you say like everything's based on a book, yes, I've heard of like the L'Officiel book, and there's like there's something called like the book that where like, clients get a book every year of like, this is what fashion photographers are doing. And like, you can find what they're doing and then like be like, where are they represented? Hire this person because like I like what they're seeing and that type of thing. And so I kind of missed all of that.
Yeah.
Like I had no real part of it in it. It was a goal at one point to like do more and try to figure out how to get myself in that book. But at that time I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go off on my own and start creating work that I'm passionate about. So I think that's still a thing. And I'm definitely not like the one to ask for advice on like how that works today.
Sure.
I think probably if anything, doing what I'm doing, if you're interested in fashion, would help you too, which is just putting together your own shoots and reaching out to whoever's available to you, makeup artists, models, finding people on Instagram or whatever to collaborate with, and building your book is probably the best thing that you can do if you're wanting to break into an industry like fashion photography, but also like if you're just wanting to, create a cool portfolio of stuff that you want. That's definitely what I did and what I would recommend.
Okay. Yeah. I was kind of, I think there's different parts of the industry, like don't know much about that, but like your book would be like your portfolio, right? Like, and that's what you're like showing and sharing to either clients or whatever, like that. Because that's what I'm always interested in, the nitty gritty of how people get hired, right? And I think fashion and branding is very different than a lot of people realize. Because like, you might not get hired by the client. Your client might be an agency, and that agency isn't even the agency that represents you. That's an ad agency or a marketing agency whose client is, this is not Brandi, but just an example, is Coca-Cola or, Vogue or whatever. And so there's like this big food chain. Yes. And I always like knowing and sharing, of like how that happens. And very rarely, I think it's going to be less rare in the future because of Instagram and online things, is like, I think people are going to skip the marketing agency. Clients, Vogue will say, oh, we saw Brandi Nicole's work, let's just get Brandi, because that's happened to me.
I mean, I hope.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Oh, that has.
Not Vogue.
Oh, that's cool.
Not Vogue.
Well, but still, but being like seen for your style and like booked because they know you and your style, and as opposed to like, oh, like I'm going through this agency. Like, yeah, that's definitely been my experience too, of being booked and finding clients. Like, yeah, I'm not represented by an agent at one point. That was a
goal.
That was a goal. Yes. And for, my fashion photographer friends that are, that is how they get primarily a lot of their bigger name clients and, cover shoots and editorials and all of that. So there's definitely still a place for that. But also you have to also establish yourself before you can get an agent. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing for me in my mind. I'm like, okay, so you need clientele to be represented, but you can't get the clientele until you're represented. Like,
Well, it's like I had a friend of mine here in DC who, she was a photographer for a museum here, which if you know DC, like we love our museums here, Smithsonian, the whole deal. She was a photographer for a museum, and her goal was, her job quintessentially was like a lot of what you learn in traditional photo schools, where it was like the most technically accurate representations of artwork and like photographing artwork, digitally cataloging artwork, all this kind of stuff, medium format, but like not for fun, medium format because you have to, right? It's required and it's this big old thing. and it was cool. And then she did a lot of like art and painting on the side, and me, like, maybe I'm just a sellout, right? Like, I'm just a wedding sellout, where I was just like, hey, if somebody's offering you the check, baby, just get in there, you know, like, whatever. We would have conversations where she's like, I would love to like do something with my art, and I was just like, what does do something mean to you? You know, is that making money off of that? Is that being put in a gallery? Like, what's going to bring you that real joy? If it's not a paycheck, that's totally fine. Let's pursue the non-paycheck route, you know? But if it is like something you'd like to do full time and make a paycheck off of it, like, let's do that. And there was a tension there because of the industry. And I think you'll resonate with this, is like, in her world, if you dabbled in commercial kinds of stuff, even just selling the same kind of work, you were like shunned, or was like inappropriate to have it be in the same museum and gallery world, in the like traditional art space. And and I was like, that really sucks, you know, like, and if you have those demons where you're like, if I never get in that gallery, I'll be so sad, like, I totally get that. But it was like, otherwise, like, go get the bag if you can, you know, like, why not? Like, if you, because she had great work. So I was like, you solved the first problem. Your work is awesome. And it's never been a better time for makers and creators and all this kind of stuff. So I'm preaching now, I'm sorry, but like, but there's like a little tension of like what you talked about with like, oh, I don't have an agent, but I need to be represented to get these big clients, at least traditionally. You know, what's that tension like? But you're obviously making it without it, right? So yeah. Do you feel like a sellout, Brandi? No, I'm just kidding.
No, not at all, actually. And it's funny because you kind of touched on in that story about your friend, something that I was thinking about just last night, which is, you know, I have this online presence of like very whimsical curated portraits, right? That are my passion. It's like what I love to create. And that's what building this aesthetic also is, just like straight from my dreams. Like, I love nothing more than sharing on Instagram the things that I create in this world. Yeah. But also that's not all that I do, right? I would consider myself so much more than just like a whimsical portrait photographer, which is, you know, I love to paint. I love to dabble in all sorts of other mediums. I have dreams and goals that are like beyond just portrait photography. You know, as I mentioned before, I still photograph the occasional wedding. I actually still do quite a bit of, or at least pre-pandemic, like event photography and things like this. And you know, I was thinking about how when in school and starting out, they really preach that you should specialize. Like, you should be known as that one thing, like you're the master of this. And so, you know, when I was building my Instagram, that's what I did. And that's what I have come to be known for. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because like, you know, once you start to put yourself out there as like, this is what I love and this is what I'm pushing out there, like you start to get booked less and less for these other things that you do, right? Or not exactly seen that you like do those things. So I'm just starting to realize that I care less about these rules of like what you put out there and like specializing for like the sake of being a master. It's like, no, I find beauty and enjoyment in a lot of different parts about photography and capturing moments and creating, right? Like, so there's like a little bit of a harm in thinking that way. But I guess that being said, when I was, you know, pushing out on Instagram and in my website, you know, that I did all of these things, it was so inconsistent that it's hard to follow. So I'll caveat all of what I just said to say, like, if you're putting together a website or you're putting together a social media presence, like, it's probably a good idea to have this like more streamlined and like consistent. So people can see what it is that you're doing, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's usually the thing I usually tell photographers, at least in my own world and commercially, is like, you can definitely, we'll just say like not specialize or despecialize and just be known as a photographer. Like, I don't think that's bad at all, you know, but I think I think it slows you down in the commercial side of success, which is totally fine. But I think like both you and I, ironically, once you have a more narrow focus, you don't have to cater to as much, and you say, okay, I can go faster if I'm in this lane, and there's no rocks in my river to navigate around. I can just go, and then maybe you get flowing, and like you don't have that commercial tension anymore. You say, you know what, like even after 2020, my retirement's still okay. Or like, hey, I still got some cash in the bank. I
Yes.
can pay my rent and I'm not like, nervous about making it. Then I
Yeah.
think you can slow down and ironically branch back out, right? It's like you've
Yes.
the trunk of the
Yes,
tree looks narrow
exactly.
before you get to see the blossoms maybe. Um,
Yeah, you have a little more flexibility after like building your foundation a little bit to be able to kind of choose which projects and like which photo things you want to
totally.
pursue or creative things,
Yeah.
like not even just photography.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always say, and
Yeah.
I heard this from somebody, and now I say this, but it was like, they just told people, they're like, hey, like your dream is to have, a really, really big bonfire, but a really, really big bonfire starts with one good little fire, and you need
Mm,
to focus on that and get that going, and like,
love that.
it's going to bring you warmth and it's going to bring you joy, and you're going to be able to eat off of it, and it's going to happen, and then you can have the time and the peace and the sanity if you're no longer building, you're maintaining to add to that, and say, okay, let's do that. Whereas like if you tried to start five little fires at one time, you're managing five fires. And
Yes.
it's not
Oh,
this mindset, or like what's the old wives' tale kind of thing is like you know, if you have three foxes or so, it's some weird thing, but it's like if you try to chase three foxes, you'll lose them all. But if you chase one, then you get at least one or something like that.
yes.
So maybe we're
Yes.
preaching or people have already turned this off. But no, I get you. I love that.
No, no, yeah, you really hit the like nail on the head there. Like that's you're so right. Yeah, it's a lot easier to build one fire
Yeah.
than like try to like do everything at once, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. What's that look like for
Especially starting out.
totally? Yeah. What's that look like for you now? I always ask double questions and I'm so sorry, but I'm just going to roll with it. What does it look like for you
Yeah,
now
no.
as far as like, without giving as much information as you'd like, but really please get nitty gritty if you feel comfortable. Like, how do you make money now? What does that look like as far as like, is it 30% weddings, 60%, what you're showing Instagram, that kind of stuff. But then also too, has there been any tension to create commercially what you put on Instagram and have you say, no, that's for me. I made those for me. Those are my recipes for me. Has there been any tension with that and been like,
Mm.
oh, like this isn't exactly how I do it. They said they wanted me for me, but we only got 90% of the way there. And then they had the 10% thing. So sorry, is that resonating at all?
Yeah, at first I was like, do I have an example? Oh yeah, I have an example.
See, I kind of ask questions with knowing there's an answer. Like I talk to artists all the time. Like I know what's up.
That's amazing. Amazing. Yes. So yeah, so I'm gonna talk pre-pandemic
Yeah,
because that's everything has just been crazy
sure.
this past year. Yeah, so I kind of like I get my income mostly from a whole bunch of different areas. Portrait photography, obviously being a big one. I get hired for my signature like whimsical style from
Yeah.
clients. And I sell a lot of prints. And so that's a lot of that.
Okay.
I also do quite a bit of like headshot type things and portrait stuff outside still. So if like a couple is coming in town and they have, they want engagement photos or, it's somebody's 16th birthday and they want to like have cute photos in New York City,
Yeah.
like I go out and like the parks and stuff like that and shoot on location or like business type headshots still. That was like a big bucket too. Also, I did quite a bit of corporate events. And it sounds like really like, interesting. But that's what I really started with in building my name and kind of like my foundation in New York City.
Yeah.
Being a portrait photographer, just moving here from Kansas City, not knowing or having like a name per se, was really, really hard to start getting clients. So I started assisting other event photographers and then kind of got into that world and realized it was really lucrative, like insanely lucrative. So I have connections with like L'Oreal and Microsoft as
Awesome.
some of like my big name clients.
Yeah.
And they are just like so cool to work with
Yeah.
because they're just like awesome and consistent, and also just like I've met so many people through those events too, right?
Yeah.
Like I use events in New York City as a big networking platform for me to then market my portraits, right?
Yeah.
So it gave me a lot of flexibility to be able to do a lot of my personal work too, right? So That was a big bucket. I now also have, I have like print sales. I also do, I'm totally blanking. Oh, it's like stock photography.
Okay.
And so basically, I have like a lot of like little
I love
buckets
it.
that you kind of have to be whatever it is that I am, like a portrait event
Sure.
photographer in New York City. So yeah, that's pretty much that. And then I'm totally blanking on your second part to the question, which
Yes. Were there any
was
occasions when you were asked to create something like what your personal work and it felt icky, or like you were, did you feel like you had to let go at all? Did you want to let go, or do you choose not to let go and say, actually, no, this is for me?
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there are some times where, I obviously get booked for my vision, right? People will see my work and they'll be like, oh, like she has a very clear, like creative eye for this like whimsical thing.
Yeah.
So, whether it's like, it's usually like a brand will reach out and they'll be like, okay, like we have this idea and we would love for you to like have your creative spin on it and like photograph this thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, great. So like my creative brain is like, yes, like I gotta have full creative control and produce something that's really awesome. And then you get on set and the client's there, and then, suddenly they have all these other ideas. And you're like,
Yeah.
like, didn't you hire me?
Yeah. Or they're seeing they were looking at the screen when you're shooting your raws, and it's like a chef saying you're going to make a meal, and you're just looking at like the bread. And you're like, that's just bread. Where is the filet mignon? And you're like, trust me, this is how we get there. Yeah.
Especially with my work, like I love, like photographing is just part of it. It's just the first half, right? I love editing and post-processing and pushing photos into creative spaces that are I have to like go into depth and describe that. If somebody is just seeing on my computer an image pop up, I don't think that they can fully see like where I know where it's going to end up. So that also definitely happens. But to be honest, also, I've been really blessed with clients that have, for the most part, trusted me in that. And so like, I'm so grateful for that. But there has definitely been times where, you get hired for your vision and then suddenly it's like, oh, they have all these other ideas. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, where did those come from?
Some marketing team, had their meeting before this event and then brought it to the client and said, tell the photographer this is what we want, or something like that. And you're like, oh, dang it. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, it happens. It happens.
That's so cool. This is a dumb question, a silly question.
No dumb questions.
Do you ever photograph dudes or like male identifying people, or does that just not fit into the workflow as far as, what you post, which is totally fine, but I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. I've photographed guys since the beginning of photographing. But I do love something about like this beautiful like feminine energy, especially for my Instagram. So if you scroll and look hard, there are a couple guys in there, but it's always like I'm putting flowers in their hair and butterflies on their face. It's very much still like a feminine energy. But that being said, I was photographing guys all week actually for a client shoot too. That's cool. Yeah, I do, but I don't end up sharing a lot of what I create, right? Yeah. So as I was saying before, I curate my Instagram to be this portfolio of images that really comes from my heart, right? Like my passion, like what I'm drawn to create and push out there. But I also, spend a lot of my time like seeing things from new perspectives and trying to push myself and constantly leaning out of my comfort zone. But that doesn't necessarily fit my aesthetic for social media. Totally. So I don't really post it there. So yeah, the answer is yes, I do. I just don't share a lot of it.
That's cool. Yeah. I was just kind of curious and what that looks like, or if like, the client comes through and they're like, hey, it's more of like a male centric brand, or if L'Oreal like had a male facing brand or something like that. But they still
it happens.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I'll always put together like a little portfolio, like a quick gallery that people can go to, like for those type of things. Like if they go to my Instagram, obviously they're going to be like, I don't think that she does this thing, but the beauty of the internet is that you can put together a quick gallery in no time and be like, trust me, I got this.
Yeah, no, totally. What would you say to people who, and like I feel like I know some of the answers to this, but I want to hear it from Brandy's perspective of like they want to make work that looks and feels like yours, not in the necessarily the end product, but the process to get there, right? They want to make work for them, and that like whatever their dream is or whatever their heart, whether it's anger or happiness or ethereumness, whatever, or right, like this for the same reason I would go play guitar and like write a riff, I'm angry or I want to write a happy song or whatever. How does somebody who is a photographer, what should they be working on, or what should they, I'm thinking like I have a mentee who we're kind of straddling two worlds, and I think it's because she wants to go fast, which I totally think that's fine. Like you want to make money now, right? You don't want to wait. So we're like shooting some weddings and couples, right? Because I'm like, hey, there's a lot of that in our area. Let me help you with that. But my big thing is she loves cosplay and nerdery and offbeat and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like telling her, I'm like, hey, I can't name any cosplay photographers. Why can't that be you? Like, let's just do that. But the thing I see is that she's probably gonna listen to this. So sorry, sorry, buddy, if you're listening. I won't say your name. But she's amazing. She's great. I love her. But I think like, I don't know if it's the digital workload or maybe it's the actual photo shoot. The creative process needs to be a lot more to have work that is going to be like different than just DSLR look. Like it has to be catchy or, right? It has to be eye catching and like striking and, a little bit more advanced. And so all that to say, it takes more than maybe just the shooting aspect. It's like, all right, we have to light this or we have to edit this a certain way. So all that to say, what would you say to that person?
Oh, I like that a lot because, okay, I have a couple things. The first thing that came to mind was exactly what you were describing. Like, notice what your other interests are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if you want to be a photographer and you also really like cosplay, that sounds like a beautiful marriage. Exactly. Like, I can't name of a single one too. Yeah. So like, why not endeavor to shoot more of that and become known as a thing? And like a word of just to not get so overwhelmed, you don't have to be the best cosplay photographer ever. Right. If that's your goal, like I think you're doing yourself a disservice, but why not just branch out more into the things that you're interested in and kind of marry your skills, right? So I love that. Like my first thing being, find your other inspirations and find ways that you can kind of marry your skills and those things, right? So for me, a lot of things I like to do are paintings and watercolors and stuff and multimedia stuff, which I'm finally just now being more comfortable sharing, right? So I love, painting something, taking a photo of it, using it as a background for my photos, photoshopping things in, compositing, printing it, painting on it again, like that just like makes me feel so like excited because it's something that is so me. And I feel like only I can do, right? Yeah. Like even if somebody else were doing those processes, they're going to do it differently and use different colors and that type of thing, So really owning whatever it is that you're interested in and finding ways to incorporate that with your work is thing number one. Thing number two is probably, just as important, maybe it's more important, is just putting in the hours, right? Like what is it? Like 8,000 hours, 80,000, something like this is like 10,000 hours, like whatever it is, like you have to really be doing the thing a lot and making so many mistakes. My photography professor would always harp and be like, you need to shoot every single day. I shoot every single day. And la, 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 la. Like you'll get so much better.
That's
and
I say all
hated
the time.
it. And I like, as a student, I'm like, yeah, I get it. And it's like, I don't know. I was so like opposed to it, but like, sure enough, I don't shoot every day and I still don't. And I think I should. And actually I'm doing a self-portrait every single day next month because I know now that is so true, right? Like you only get better when you really push yourself to do the thing as often as possible. So you make those mistakes, you get faster, you start to find, what's easy, what's difficult, and then whatever's difficult becomes easier. And then you find new ways to just keep growing, right? So that that is probably number one. So find your inspiration, find ways to marry, your photography and your inspiration,
Yeah.
and put in the hours. Just start doing something, anything. You don't even have to share it, but taking the photos, editing them, it'll take you far.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's what I always feel bad that the advice is so simple, but the execution is hard, where it is like, hey, shoot every day. And like, I imagine you doing like for every photo on your Instagram, there's 1,000 that we didn't get to see. And you're like, yeah, those did not, those weren't my vision. Like those were not the truest representation of it. And maybe there's a shoot where like you fail, and you're like, I'm not showing anything from this, or I don't want to, or I'm not satisfied, or, and I think
It happens often.
right.
And that's normal. That's normal. I think like if that happens, especially in the beginning, like we get really down on ourselves and then we're like, turns out I'm not a photographer. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, why do we say these things to ourselves? It's all learning, forever. For the rest of my life, I'll still be learning, like I definitely don't think that I am like, where I want to be, where I'm going to be, like we're just constantly like learning new things.
No, totally. Yeah. I think the pressure for some people sometimes of it's like, at least for me, like one of my big things right now is like, is like weight loss. And I'm like, yeah, I want to lose weight and all this kind of stuff. And you think of what life could be like if you hit your goal, whatever that is. And the workload to get there. But it's like if you and I were going to go out for the New England Patriots and we're going to go win a Super Bowl. We're like, oh, the pressure is on, and we have to be ready. We have to become professional football players in 10 years. But it's like even myself, I get overwhelmed thinking about that process. But at the same time, it's like, what can I do today? Can I take a photo today? Can I experiment with portraits today? Can I get out the camera on the tripod? Can I leave the camera on the tripod for tomorrow? Can I do this? Like, oh, the light isn't how I want it. Well, like, let's learn to adjust or adapt. Or, hey, maybe today is the dark and moody day and tomorrow is the bright, whatever. And it's like,
adapting. Yes.
I think that is like, sadly, I think that's because of a lot of photographers experience trauma and we become experts at pushing through. And there are some people that maybe don't have that edge. But I think like that, you can't teach that. You can't teach the perseverance of like, or mental toughness of like, hey, it's only one day at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day, or how many bites does it take to eat a whale? One bite at a time,
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, whales.
How do you climb Mount Everest?
Yeah.
One step at a time. Yeah. Yeah. And that's been a big thing in pandemic too, for me, is that feeling of overwhelmingness of like my goals.
Yeah.
Like I've always been, for as long as I can remember, somebody that's really excited about my goals, right? Like, oh, like where do I want to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, my life? What do I want to accomplish? And it's like the short-term goals are really helpful, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it's really good for you to be like, okay, next year, I think I'd like to have a YouTube channel, because if I didn't say that last year, I wouldn't have started it this year, like those things I think are really, really good, and kind of pushing yourself to make those milestones of like, okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? Right. But I started to realize that these like loftier ones, these like 5-year, 10-year lifetime things is just like, I started to really hone in on how do I get there? How do I get there? And getting way overwhelmed and anxious, right? Like there's for me, I'm just speaking of personal, I'm sure like people, can do this better than I can, but for me, I found that protecting my creative energy means that I need to focus less on those and just kind of really focus in on my shorter term, like maybe what's happening in the next year, because otherwise, like I have an idea of things that I would like to do, but, starting to realize when you get anxious, when you get overwhelmed, isn't really helpful, right? So like, what can you do today, right?
Yeah.
Like if you tell yourself you're going to shoot every single day and you're not feeling particularly motivated, find the easiest thing that you can do and just do it, like, because then it's not like a big thing, So when I was doing a self-portrait every day in 2017, I would definitely run into those days. I got super sick one day. I was like, there's no way I can be creative. So I just set up my I already had my tripod set up. Like everything was still like from the day before, which, I'm glad. So I just like did this like really simple like thing and posted it. And I did it. Right. And I think that was like the lesson is like, I still challenge myself. At the end, I was able to say, I did this and I grew a whole bunch. Right. Like it's easy to make excuses, but once you start actually putting in that work and realizing that you can do something really, really easy and it's still going to be beautiful, like that's important too. Yeah. Putting in the work, doing something. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it's like even if it doesn't turn out well that day, like
that's okay.
like when we all look at your Instagram, for better or for worse, we're not thinking about the things you missed, like somebody's highlight reel or why you want to be hired or like, the where you pushed through and what you finished, like I assume brings you joy,
Yeah.
And it's, you're going to like, for me, like you're going to have days where it's like you ate poorly or you had a bad workout or whatever, but it's like we need some consistency, not perfection along the way.
Yes.
But like our society,
that's where you learn.
Yeah. Well, and something I feel like, and I don't know, this isn't about the mentee anymore, but just lots of photographers who, and I can feel this in ourselves, but there is a point where you feel like you don't need to learn anymore, or you're even there's times when I felt like I was searching. I was like, what do I need to do next creatively? Like I'm happy, I'm not sad. There's no situation I walk into and say, oh, what am I going to do? Or like I enjoy that challenge, so I'm like, but what is that next thing? And but that's after like 2020. I looked at and I had shot my millionth photo, so it's like I've shot a million photos to get to this point, and the public has seen, less than 1,000, right? Or whatever.
Yes.
And so I'm like, but I think other photographers hit that feeling early, because the technology and the knowledge and everything, like the barriers to entry are so low, which I think is awesome. I love that. This podcast is free. Normally people have to pay to come hear us talk to each other, right? Like this podcast is free, and I think some photographers hit that moment too early and they go, yeah, my work looks good. Or they say, if my bank account is happy, then that means I am good. So that's kind of the downside of like, the commercial success is like, no, like make good art that, if that is your goal, right? Like, the reason it's not selling is because it's not at its peak or it's not worth it yet, but like it will be. We got to put some time in. So I don't know, I'm preaching, but yeah.
Absolutely. For me, creating, photographing is a passion. It is what I like need to do.
Yeah.
Like I do not feel like I am doing things with my life if I'm not creating, right? Like it is very much like you need water, you need food, you need sleep. I need to create, right?
Okay.
Like, and so for me, photographing something and maybe nothing turns out is totally fine. Because at the end of the day, I still created something, right?
Yeah.
Like, and again, like for me, it's not even just photographing, right? It's painting, it's cooking, it's, something where you're just creating, it's gardening, like something like you're doing something, you're creating something that is really a need for me. And so I mark it up as a win as often as I can remind myself to, when you are able to set aside that time and kind of work on your creative muscle,
right.
Like stretching that as often as possible every single day, again, like it is so important.
I love that.
So important.
I love that. What other advice you got in there? No. We just hit an hour in the Zoom. So, yeah.
I had two quotes. I was like, preparing for this, I was just like, I want to make sure that whatever I say is like, useful for somebody. And so I'm a big on quotes. I think that
you're a quotes and lyrics
I'm not
girl,
great
for sure.
I'm not great with words myself. I feel like I'm always striving for the right ones,
okay.
so a good podcast, I'm like, I hope whatever I'm saying makes sense and connects to people.
Yeah.
But I did have some quotes that I wanted to share because they, I think, really beautifully put some life lessons that I think are really important. So there's two life lessons and there's two quotes. So one of this is our dreams becoming realities, kind of as an idea. Again, I feel like from a young age, I knew I wanted to be a creator. I knew I wanted to photograph. I knew that I had these dreams and I wanted my dreams to become a reality, right?
Yeah.
So here's this quote by Glennon Doyle, who is an amazing author, and I love her so much. And so it goes, let's conjure up from the depths of our souls the truest, most beautiful lives we can imagine, the truest, most beautiful families we can fathom, the truest, most beautiful world that we can hope for. Let's put it all on paper. Let's look at what we've written and decide that these are not pipe dreams. These are our marching orders. These are our blueprints for our lives, our families, and the world. May the invisible order become visible. May our dreams become our plans.
Let's fucking go.
Like I hear that and I get chills. I literally have goosebumps right now.
I love it.
Like there's something about that, right? Like I think a lot of us are really afraid to realize what our dreams are, right? Like even if our dream is as simple as mine, which is just to create, right? Like not even with a purpose or like a plan or a direction, just a thing that you like to do.
Yeah.
And setting aside that time to like make our dreams a reality. I love so much.
That's so good. I love that.
So the other little life lesson that I think is really important, if there's time,
go for
if
it.
I may,
Sing it, girl.
is how inspiration plays a role in life and in my life. And again, it's like putting in the time, finding your inspiration, right? These are the two kind of themes like that's somehow been strung through this whole topic. So the quote on inspiration goes like this: you are the books that you read, the films you watch, the music you listen to, the people you meet, the dreams you have, and the conversations you engage in. You are what you take from these. You are the sound of the ocean, breath of the fresh air, the brightest light in the darkest corner. You are a collective of every experience you've ever had in your life. You are every single second of every day. So drown yourself in a sea of knowledge and existence. Let the words run through your veins and the colors fill your mind until there's nothing left to do but explode. There are no wrong answers. Inspiration is everything. Sit back, relax, and take it all in.
I love it.
Whew.
Man, I'm about to text you and be like, Brandi, can we start a quote group chat where we can only share one quote a day each person, so there's no awkward overwhelm, but like that.
No,
that's so cool.
I have one of my really good friends is super into words and writing. And again, I'm not a writer. I'm trying to dabble more into that because I find it so inspiring. Sure. But we have like a little quote of Google Doc too, where we find something, we'll go copy and paste. Maybe I'll share that. Actually, it sounds like something that needs to be out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have captions now for the next 100 photos or whatever. I noticed too, you're definitely you definitely love, you're one of those people where I'm similar this way too. If I know the lyrics, that like lyrics to songs like hit you and you're like, okay, yeah, like this is, even if the song is not a good song, you're like, no, but this phrase described how I felt or, whatever. So yeah, I could tell.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lyrics, but also even just like the notes, right? I don't know anything about music, but I love it. It's on all the time. Like if my Spotify, like hours and minutes is like, you actually listen to it from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. Is everything okay? But yeah, just the notes and how they relate to each other and how sounds like the build up and everything, like lyrics aside, like I listen to instrumental and stuff like that too, because there's something really beautiful about music, something really inspiring.
I love that. That's so cool. Brandi, you're awesome. You're like 100,000 times better than I even thought, which was already really good. So I loved having you on.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, you guys are welcome back anytime. We can have you and Felix come on. Like I think too, there's an element I've learned as like, I'm in my 30s now, so I'm getting old. But it's like especially with photographers where maybe they're not in the same city, or hopefully it's my approach, but like we need so much more conversations and community in photo industry in general, where like my dream is to have a really big table and all of us are there, and it's wedding people, fashion people, Felix. Like, your podcast is going to come out at the beginning of this year. We had Pete Souza, President Obama's photographer, on the podcast, right? You know, amazing. Days before that, we had, you know, Amy Vitale, National Geographic photographer, on that. Yes. And then it's like, we also had, you know, maybe somebody that none of us had heard of, or a different section hadn't heard of, or like Noemi Chinanga, right? So somebody who's in a similar vein, you might become friends. Like,
yes.
And I think it's like,
diversify your community. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, get everybody at the table. Let's like make all the connections.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it's so nice too. Like, I love, you know, I ask some nitty gritty questions because I think like people need to know, like, oh, what does this look like for, it's like how I made this, but like in the fashion world or the, you know, editorial world. But it's like, you know, photographers are scared of competition, you know, like that fashion photographer you mentioned, or the people that you maybe knocked on those doors. And there's a difference between being rude and having a boundary, you know, right? Like I get inquiries all the time to, you know, hey, can I buy you lunch? And I say, hey, like, unfortunately my time is more valuable than lunch now.
Yes.
So I have to charge you for that time. But if you pay that time, I'll give you anything and everything I can possibly ever show you all the time.
Absolutely. Oh man, yes, you said it so beautifully. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, listen to the show. You can have it, you know. You can just send them a voice memo when somebody wants to buy you lunch, you know. You know, or it's like...
Oh, but it's tough too, because like exactly what you're saying, like you want everybody at your table, right? Yeah. Like as many people as possible to make it a really diverse, great group of like learning and challenging each other, right? Yeah. And so I want to help as many people as humanly possible, but it's not possible to get lunch and coffee and hang out, you know, with everyone in person. You know, I think photo industry events and trade shows are a great time to kind of reach as many people as possible. But even those, is like you have only a set amount of time and social energy, you know, I'm totally with you. But luckily we have the internet and the ability to build communities online, which have been really, really helpful for me. So cool. You with your podcast, and I have a Facebook community group where I'm actually been almost like now internet friends with like thousands of people that like I wasn't able to meet in this past year, and really like nurture that community aspect. And if people have questions, let's as a group answer, and as a group get to know each other. And I think that that's so nice, is to diversify that group as much as possible.
I love that. And it's like, there's no, you know, one of the things with like the boundaries of the timing thing is like, there's also the freedom of like, you know, we're not trying to engage this for competition reasons. You know, like you can tell when somebody's coming to you with a genuine question, or they're trying to take some food off your plate. And there's a difference between that, or like something I joke with Felix, every podcast guest, but you know, like I'm like, hey, next time I'm in New York City, like I'm going to text every New York City guest and be like, hey, who's free for coffee? Like, hey, are you free for coffee? Like, let's hang out. And obviously I want to respect people's time, but like also too, I'm not buying coffee for information either. I'm like, now we have more friends, or now we have more friends that get it, that we can be honest with, who aren't out to get me. Adam's not trying to take Brandi's bread or Felix's bread or Andre's bread or whatever. You know, so there's a comfort there too. Because I think the weirdest thing I've seen about this industry, man, we were preaching today. I'm so sorry, everybody.
No,
it's like there's
let's get into it.
It's like it's really hard for us to have, maybe in DC, right? It's the creative scene it's getting there. We're making a lot of waves. I know a lot of great people down here, but it's not New York or LA. And we know that. But it's like, we're so hungry to grind and push to be New York and LA or San Francisco, that I think there are glimmers of hope, but we miss out on having just colleagues, right? Like we work alone, but I'm like, Brandi can be a colleague, you know? Yeah, we're both in the industry, or we're both friends, or like, hey, like, yeah, if we're in DC or New York or whatever, like we miss out on that. And I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully in a few months, you know, post-pandemic, maybe we'll just have like a photo meetup or a beer to talk meetup or something, or like, you know, and have it be competition free. Like, sure, I'll talk shop with anybody. You can ask me anything. But it's like, you also won't be sad if I didn't, you know, sell you my email templates that day, or like, hey, we're just talking. Like, I'm just eating chocolate milk or whatever.
Honestly, and I don't mind. I really try to keep the word competition out of my vocabulary as much as possible and out of my mind, because it's like, nope, in my mind, I'm really trying to help people. If I have a nugget of knowledge that can really transform somebody's life,
Yeah.
I am so willing to give that, in the same kind of breath. I encourage people, and a lot of people really don't like this. And to a certain point, like, I encourage people to expand their photography style into something that's similar to my own if it inspires them. If they can, in that process of trying to emulate an image of mine, they find something in themselves that
Yeah.
is really exciting, do it. Like, I applaud that, because it's just constantly trying to push yourself out of your comfort zone and into different things and meeting different people and try, like, everything you're saying is just like, yes, like, let's help each other, let's build our communities, and just be friendly with each other, like empathy, kindness, like,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone's my friend. Like, I really try not to see anybody as competition. Like, it's people ask me and Emily all the time, like, do you guys feel competitive? Like, we're both kind of like portrait. She's definitely more fashion, but like, if a job comes up, if we feel competitive, and it's never, we're always cheering each other on. And I think that that's how it should be,
Yeah.
like, with everyone. She's sitting next to me, literally, like,
Yeah.
talking about me.
Well, it's like something too. I tell mentees and other wedding photographers, I'm like, if a client chose somebody else and they chose them because of style, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a blessing. Like,
Yeah.
you just avoided a red flag. Like, thank
Yeah.
God that they picked that person. Or like, if somebody wants very light and airy and only tall, dark, and handsome Barbie looking people on wedding day with like just green and white as the main colors, they'll be unhappy with my stuff. Or vice versa. If somebody's looking for that like very elegant, beautiful, luxury, old money look wedding wise, they'll also be unhappy with me, or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
Now if it is, if you're similarly spec'd as workers, like, I'm sure you and her, like, you have different work, and the wise people who are very good at like deducing the differences, like, they'll choose whoever's best for the gig, whatever, even if you were the same price. And hopefully that's what you want to happen, by any means. Now, if she undercuts you, then it's like, okay, well then, yeah, like, I value myself more. No offense, Emily. So it's like, that's a whole other ball game. So yeah, I think that's one of those things that people don't think about too much. They just think about, again, like, they took our jobs kind of thing, just like,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I would so willingly give people clients emails of mine, like, that's, I think, where I would draw the line of like helping people, because that would be like the only thing, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, in terms of like, oh, how would you light something? I'm so willing to give that information. I don't think that I don't see that as like competition or like they took our jobs, like, I am always a proponent of trying to encourage people to grow and grow in their craft and grow in their clientele. Like, when we grow, we all grow, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Especially in our communities. So
I love that. Well, cool. Brandi, this has been absolutely freaking incredible. Where can people go to find out more about you, chat with you about the episode, talk to you, look at your work, all that jazz?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. To be honest, I am definitely most active on Instagram at Brandi Nicole Photo.
Okay.
I
That's with an
have
I.
a lot of work there with an I. Yes, exactly. I'm super active in stories. I try to respond to messages. I also have a Facebook community, as I said, that is really great. It's Exploring Creativity with Brandi Nicole.
Okay.
I encourage everybody to go on there, share your work, ask questions. It's a great group of people. We are basically like just friends. Like, it's like a little family. And I'm super, super proud of that community and all of the wonderful things that is shared in there. I also said I started a YouTube channel last year, which was a big goal of mine. And I am trying to share a lot of information I know, educational content, how I edit, random things like how to paint photography backgrounds and things like that on my YouTube channel. So that is also Brandi Nicole Photo. And yeah, those are pretty much the main things. But if you're trying to connect, I would definitely recommend Instagram or Facebook.
I love it. Awesome. Brandi, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Guys, thank you so much for checking out the Bearded Hog. It really means a lot. If you can, leave a like on the video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications on when new videos come out immediately. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.